to abortion centers and collected the fetuses that were aborted. But I found out during that memory that demons are actually standing by to capture the souls of these children when they're aborted, and then they're harvested. And it's an area that is just new to me, but the Holy Spirit is really helping me to understand how that's worked through, many, many, many years. And so, yeah.
Right. And it gets so intricate when you're working through this stuff, because it's like what went where and just how complex is this. One of the interesting things that I think people need to understand is there's a lot of people that have had abortions or done this, and they will see their child in heaven with Jesus. God will actually show them. Or, there was a miscarriage or whatever. Sometimes people that have been involved in cults will wonder, like, well, where are these babies, and they'll have a vision and they'll see the baby in heaven. And then they come back to the Bible and what it says in 1 Samuel, when David lost his first child, and he says, he cannot come to me, but I will go to him. The idea that David was going to meet him first in Abraham's bosom and then in heaven, that would have been collected. And so we have a very simplistic view of what happens when, things like abortions take place. But what we don't always take into account is fragmentation of the soul in the process of an abortion or a, something like that, a birth and then ritual killing of a child. Or if it's induced early, then the fetus that comes out and then ritually killed. There's a fragmentation that occurs, and because the soul is able to be split, it's like pieces of the soul are captured by the demons. Some of it may be taken to heaven, but not the 100% of it like we would like to assume. And so in essence, both perspectives have truth to them. And we run into this. And then we were running into the question of, wait a minute, and this was the one that really got us messed up, Jan. I was asking Jesus, what about the spirit? If the souls are being partially captured as the fragments are going, and maybe your angels are getting pieces of them and taking those to heaven, okay, great. What about their human spirit? What happens to those? And we got back some interesting things which seem to fall right in line with Ecclesiastes 12:7. I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to let you tell us what you were getting when all of this was transacting. But Ecclesiastes 12:7 says, "Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it." Not really delineating between different types of people, just saying almost matter of fact, oh, the spirit just goes back to God. Anyway, this is very interesting. So Jan, go ahead and tell us what you remember.
Yeah, I remember this now because you were asking me about the spirit, because I told you that I had seen my aborted child in heaven. And so I knew that the spirit went back to heaven, but the soul, you started kind of asking more and more questions about that, and I sort of went into this realm where the information was getting downloaded to me, but it was a hard download. And so anyway, what I got was that the soul is actually used by Satan for energy, that the energy of the soul that he captures become like little energy factories or little battery storage batteries, where he actually siphons off this energy for his kingdom and for the operations that he's doing within his kingdom. And that eventually those lead to death. Death is like a black hole. Now, correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, because when this came to me, I felt like I was operating on a whole different dimension. It was hard for me to stay there in the moment, because I kept wanting to come back to three-dimensional thinking or something. I don't know, but what I think I wrote about it a little bit later too, was that the way I understood it that day was that the souls are captured, they're they're used in Hades and hell for energy. Eventually they go into a black hole, which is death, and that becomes Satan's, and Satan's been accumulating and building that for millennia. Does that sound right?
So, one of the interesting things is that, and I will say this, when we've done city intercession, you know, we were dealing with something known as the armies of the dead, which surprisingly is a real issue. And we were doing this corporately, and we ran smack dab into the abortion agenda. And what we ran into during the city intercession was that they had used the soul fragments of many aborted fetuses in order to gridlock evil agendas into the city itself. And so we found ourselves trying to unravel some of that, with the angels and with Jesus during this intercession for the city. There's no one in the world that's going to tell me that abortion is God's best for anyone, period. There's no one in the world that's going to tell me that, pro-choice is a real position that a righteous person can stand on. Because I have just become aware of so much that the evil kingdom powers up with infant sacrifice. And it's not just about the blood that's shed at the event. It's about what they're doing with what they can harvest afterwards. They're running agendas against cities. They're running agendas against nations. They're running agendas against people groups. And they are powering it up with abortion and ritual killings of infants. So, Jan, we ran into quite a bit on this